Today I'm going to make a video showing you how to change out the brake shoes on a mid-80s 1-ton rear axle. The Blazer's an 84, but the previous owner put 1-ton axles in it for rock crawling because they're a lot sturdier, a lot beefier for taking all that abuse. So when I looked this up, I looked it up to figure out the size of shoes that I need. You kind of had to measure them too, but I ended up looking under K30, let's say K30 1-ton pickup, or I think the Suburban for the same year, as long as it says 1-ton axle. It should be the same, but I'll give you the part number for the shoes when I get it, and the brake cylinder. So get your wheel off, get your jack stands, put a wheel chock on it because I'm on a slight decline here, so I don't want the truck rolling away. So chock your front wheels, jack stands on the back. Wheels off. These are 3/4 inch bolts, and I got a towel underneath because you're going to lose a little bit of gear fluid that's going to come out, so make sure you have something down there to catch that. Alright, go. Got my 8 bolts here. Just set those off to the side. And as you can see, it's starting to drip a little bit already. So this thing's just going to slide out. You're probably going to lose just a couple ounces of gear fluid, but put something down there to keep from making a huge mess. This baby's going to slide all the way out here, and then you can see there's the splined end that's going to go in there when we put this all back together. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what we got inside here. We've got a lock ring that's got to come off first, right in here. That's going to have to come up. Then right behind there's a little keyway that's got to come out. And then this big nut. Normally it's not too bad, and if you don't have this thing to go on there and take it off, sometimes you can just put a big old screwdriver here and just hit that down with a hammer just enough to get it loose, to get that thing to come off. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put these in a nice little neat organized pile, so that way I know where they're at and I know where they need to go. Pull this keyway out. You see that little piece. Put that together there. Let's see if I can take this off without. Yeah, as you can see, it's not tight. But that lock ring and the keyway keeps it from backing off. And there's our lock nut. Now the whole drum should come off by itself. You've got some bearings inside of here, and they will come off all together because the ones inside of here are pressed in or set in from the outside or inside. So set that baby down there for a second. These things are heavy. They are big and they're heavy. So I did the brake cylinder on the other side because it was leaking, and I did the shoes because the shoes had been saturated with brake dust or brake fluid, sorry. So if you're gonna do one side because it's bad, just do both. Don't try to go get out of it cheap. Just do both sides. And the good thing to do also is do one side at a time, so in case you get all this stuff taken apart and you can't figure out which way it goes back in, you can go back and reference the other side and look at it. Another thing I like to do, and I tell people a lot, is take pictures. Get out your cell phone, take pictures of all of this stuff, where all these, which spring is on which side, how they go in what order, so that way you will know exactly how it goes back together. So we're gonna have to take all this stuff off. I did not get the hardware kit because it didn't come with it. Sometimes it will come with a hardware kit. But we're just gonna take these apart. Now, back in the day, we just used pliers and screwdrivers and whatever to get these on. But on a regular car, it's a lot easier. These springs are way beefier and a lot stronger. So I splurged on a set of these brake drum pliers because I figured I might as well give it a shot and see what happens. It's got this end here that you're supposed to be able to go on this cup and pull that pin off. And there's a hook for hooking the springs as well. So we're gonna give it a shot and see how it works. There we go. That wasn't too bad. It just hooked onto this little part here. Now what I'll do also is I take these off and I lay them on the concrete in the orientation in which they are on here. So you kind of also can keep those things straight. I don't think I'm gonna be able to get that one out, but tell you what, we're gonna give this a try. Not sure how this is supposed to work, but what I'm gonna do, you can also just wedge a screwdriver in there. All right, so we got it all apart, got it all off. This part is attached to the parking brake cable, and mine works fine, so I'm not gonna mess with this. I'm gonna leave it there, but you need to be cautious because this pin goes through here, and then there's a little itty bitty like C-clip that goes in there, so don't lose that. But that goes through there. So there's a little slot where that feeds into there. So the shoes don't look too bad. And if you ever have a hard time finding the right part because it's a different size from what your truck normally has, I ended up having to scrape all this crud off of here. Luckily I found a number and it was FMS 452, and when I looked at the AutoZone, and again I'm not getting reimbursed from these guys, but when I looked at it, it was part number something 452, so that kind of helped out as well to make sure I had the right parts, the right shoe. But I also measured them, the width and the length, because as you can see, these are a lot more massive shoes than the old ones. So I'm gonna clean it up a little bit. I'm gonna do the brake cylinder, and as you can see, both of these came off. So the seals are ready. It didn't look bad, but once this came out, these things came apart with it. So these are the rubber seals that go on the end here. So I'll clean those up a little bit because those are going to go into my new wheel cylinder. So save yourself a whole lot of trouble dealing with brake cylinders, because we have to get the brake line off of it, and we don't want to drip a bunch of brake fluid all over the place. So I know for certain that is the correct part. So what you're going to have to do, since it's recessed in there, there's two bolts on top here that you have to kind of break loose. But I'm also going to break the brake line loose a little bit here too. So I got to get those wrenches. I believe that was a 3/8. I believe it was the 3/8 bolts on the top. And I can't remember exactly what the size was for the brake line. I'll figure that out. You know what? I can see some paint flaking off here. As you all know, brake fluid's going to take that off, so maybe we did have some kind of a leak back in here, but it wasn't wet by any means, like wet with brake fluid all over the place. But get that off. We'll swap that out. So what I'll do is disconnect that brake line, screw the brake line up back onto the new one as soon as possible. That will losing hardly any fluid because we don't want to have to bleed the brakes, but this is still a good idea to do it. But that'll have to be something to be done later. All right. On the back here, the two bolts that are holding this in place are 3/8, and the brake line that connects to the back of it is also 3/8. So don't use a regular open end. You're going to round them off and you're going to ruin it. Get a set of these pipe wrenches. They're specifically made for this, so that we don't have to worry about that. It probably wouldn't be that big of a deal, but you never know. What if I go to the parts store, nobody's got this specific brake line, and then here I am turning this into like a 2 or 3 day deal because I can't find the right brake line. So get this. We're gonna swap this out. Here's my new one. I got this off of Amazon of all places. The part number is 18E112. I get stuff from Rock Auto. I'm sure you've all heard me say that a million times. Rock Auto's pretty good too. You can actually get AC Delco parts a lot cheaper. So here's your new one. Leave this cap on because that's where you don't want any contaminants in there. And then that's your bleeder screw, so we can leave that cap on there. It probably will fall off over time, but that's not too big of a deal. So I'm going to try and swap this out as fast as I can without losing too much brake fluid. And there we go. There's my old one. Let's put the new one on here real quick. Get that screwed in. Alright, now I've got everything ready to go back on. I've got the brake cylinders back on. Tightened up those two bolts, tightened up the brake line. It's not leaking. And I sprayed it all down with some brake cleaner to make sure I got all that brake fluid residue off of here, off the front and the back. Now, looking at the shoes, they look identical. They've got the same holes. The new ones have the same holes. Now, there is a front and a back. So when you hold them up next to each other and line up the pads, you can see that the one on the right is a little bit longer. And when we hold them together like that, line up the tops, the one on my left, or the one that's in the back, is longer. It has a longer braking surface, probably about 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch longer. So that's another good reason why don't just take these and throw them away. Take them out, set them down just like that, so that way you know which one was which. Just a good habit to get into with whatever you're doing. So got that back on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this on here. Easiest way I found to first line this up is this cup spring. Well, this pin comes through this hole back here. It's going to go through this, and what you have to do is you have to hold it in place. You have to compress the spring down and then spin it 90 degrees so that latches and holds in. That will kind of hold the brake shoe kind of in place as best as possible for the time being, because otherwise there's nothing really that's going to hold it. Those springs are kind of just holding it in the correct position to brake when you do hit your brake pedal. So this is the easiest way I've found to do it. And then this little cup thing goes in the hole there too. Don't forget to save that. So I don't throw anything. I don't throw any of this stuff away until I'm 100% done with the project and everything's put back together. That way I don't have to worry about it if I threw away something important. Now, this pin is going to go through this hole, and there's nothing to hold it in the back, so you're going to have to hold it like that. You're going to have to line it up through that hole. So one hand is holding that pin in the back, and the other one is putting this on. And I think I've realized something. This end cup wasn't necessarily for getting these pins on and off, although it probably would work, but it works great for compressing this spring down on here. So I get it lined up, like I put it like straight up and down, put the pin in here, put the spring part on. Again, you almost have to hold it down with that one hand. And it's not easy. It's almost easier to have a second person holding this stuff for you, because you have to compress the spring. Sometimes I even just do it with the needle nose pliers. I'll just compress this thing down because I can kind of see a little bit better, and then I turn it. Once I turn it a little bit, get it back in position where it needs to go. And as you can see, you have to push that in, you have to hold it and turn it 90 degrees so that that sits in that cup there and holds that in place. Hopefully that's focusing well enough on there. So I do this one, I do both of them to get that, and then you can start putting your springs in place. So we'll get that going now. That little C-clip I told you about. I put that thing on here. Put that pin in a little bitty hole. Just enough so you can see that indentation in the pin on the outsides, and then you just slide this thing on. It's not very easy to do with your fingers, so it's going to have a set of pliers. There, just slide that in so that way this can pivot. It's going to be kind of tight just because the components are new. But I think I already made a boo-boo. I think I already made a mistake because, or no, I didn't. This piece goes through that as well. Yeah, this one, this piece. Also, you have to put the cup through that hole and then through this hole here. Get that to stay in place. And then you've also got to hold all that together. Luckily that cup kind of holds that thing in place, but this is the hard part. You really have to push on that very hard. As you can see, this is not easy. This is not fun at all. Do not enjoy doing brake shoes. It's not fun. I would rather upgrade to disc brakes on this and get rid of all of this, but it's not in the budget right now, so that little spring goes down there in the bottom. That's going to get held in place up there. So this one has come off of here, so this one's going to be even more of a pain in the butt to get this one on, because it doesn't want to stay on there. because you've got to get that all lined up. Finally, good Lord. Yeah, that's not fun. I do not enjoy doing brake shoes at all. Which is why I'm making this video for you guys, so you can see what a big pain in the ass it is. It can be done. It can be. It is not fun. So, got my shoes on. I'm gonna throw the other ones out of the way here. Now, the adjuster that was on the bottom has this cap, and that goes on there, and that'll go between the teeth on the bottom here. One thing that I had to do with others was I had to take the thing apart, and I had to heat it up with the torch because it was tight. It was stuck together real good, and it was not moving. So. Okay, that bar goes in there. Then this hooks down here on this extra brake piece. So that's gonna go be adjusted to that. It should go on there. There, got that hooked around there. And I already messed up. I already forgot to put this piece back on. Good thing that doesn't have a lot of tension on it right now, but that's all right. That's got to go in there. That in front of the brake shoes. A little extra bracket to keep everything in place. And you can just do that with your screwdriver to get that up around there. So that's in place. It needs to be. I'm going to put the pins in for the brake cylinder. So this pin is going to go in that orientation, this one on the bottom, one on the top. That's going to slide into this opening here, so that way it doesn't fall out. You can kind of manipulate your brake shoes around a little bit because we haven't put the springs in yet. But this one on over here. I'm gonna have to take this off again. So, totally forgot this is how this needs to go. Pull this brake shoe back out a little bit, just so we can get those pins centered in the cylinder there. Because that's what's gonna squeeze out when you push the brakes. It's gonna push those pins out, it's gonna push these shoes out. Get you to stop. Alright. Now, I would totally put on new brake hardware if it had come with it, but I wasn't trying to spend a ton of money. I just wanted to correct it to make this thing work better because it had a leak on that side. So, we got those plungers from the cylinder. We got that piece on. We got this piece on. This brake adjuster bar is going to go here. It's got to slide in there to keep that in the correct position. Now, the only real things I've got left are just my springs for the sides. And this one, the shorter hook, is going to go in this hole here. You kind of have to feed it around so you get in this orientation. Then what I do is I just get it up here like this, and I just feed that spring on until it gets to the right position, and just bend it over, and it will eventually pop up over that spring. Or over the pin there, that central pin. This one, yeah, this one here is going to go in this side, so you kind of have to, you got to hook it in here, feed it around, because this hook is going to go around that one there. Let's see if we can make this one happen. Again, feed it under the screwdriver, go over the end of that pin. She should, it's going to be tough because these springs are tough, but yeah, there you go. That one's fed in place. That one's fed in place. Then I've got this spring that goes on the bottom. There's holes here, and there's a hole here on the shoe, not on this bracket here itself. Again, like I was saying, this brake adjuster, I had to heat it up and hit it with some PB Blaster. WD-40 works pretty good too, just to get this to spin. And this is a backwards thread, because you can use this. This is going to adjust using this bracket here, because that bracket will click down on here. So let me get it with a little bit more PB Blaster, just to get some in there to keep those parts moving. And it's going to have to go in like this, so that bar can adjust against that. Undo this spring. Take that spring off just for a second, just so I can maybe move this down a little bit more to get this spring. Because this spring is easier to connect to the top. See? A lot easier to do that way. Now, I guess I made another mistake there, didn't I? That's got to go on that side. Push this in. I get my plunger lined up again. And then, yeah, see, this thing wants to slide the other direction now. So this might be a little tougher, but that little spring at the bottom is not fun. There we go. That's the one I need. Now, when I did the other side, and I put this adjuster, I literally, it was probably out 3/4 of an inch down from here, because the brakes are, I believe they're self-adjusting, but I had to get the drum back over these big fat shoes, so they got a lot more meat on them now. It was a lot more difficult to get that accomplished. Now, there we go. Pins in there. You can see that arm is going to keep adjusting that. So that should be it. should be all ready to go back on. All I have to do is put my nut back on there with my keyway and my lock ring, and I should be good to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the drum over here. I'm going to test fit it and see if I can make sure it's going to actually slide over here. If you get new rotors or new drums, hit them with the brake cleaner, because they always have like some kind of a coating on there to keep them from rusting, and you don't want that on there. The shoes I'm not really too worried about unless I have my greasy hands all over them. If I like grease and nasty shit all over my hands and I got that grease all over these shoes, I'd probably be a little more concerned, but I did not. So let's try and get this drum back on here. And this thing, like I said, it is heavy. It is super heavy. So if you can't get her to go on here. Wow, that went on way easier than the other side did. All right, it was super tight on the other one. I believe there's a gasket that is supposed to go in here, in between this surface and the drum, and I believe that's why there's so much of that gunk that came out. It's like gasket material. So I'm not too worried about it. I didn't do the other side, and I haven't had any leaks, haven't had any issues over there. This is spinning pretty good. The bearings are in good shape, but again, I'm not trying to do a full rebuild on this because bearings are good shape. Everything looks pretty good there, and I don't want to spend all that time and money redoing all this stuff just to go and take this whole assembly out of here and put disc brakes on there. So I'm just going to leave it the way it is. Alright, so should just be this thing on here. Gunk all over there. Locking up. So make sure that bearing, there's one on the inside, there's one here. You have to make sure that's nice and centered when you slide this on so it doesn't go on weird. And what I'm going to do, let's get this nut. Kind of have to hold this thing. There we go. Just fit on. So. I'm going to use that 6-pointed socket. Push this baby on here. Try to hold the drum up here. Just a little bump back. So I gotta line up the keyway and the spindle that's right up here, and then the cutout in the nut itself. Again, that keyway slides in there, so that way that thing doesn't back out, doesn't move, and the lock ring goes on there, and that bottom part, the little hook, that goes in the keyway slot also. So what I do is I get that kind of on there, start feeding it, and then you just pop it over like that. Make sure it's back as far as we can get it on those threads, and that should be everything. Now it's just putting the axle back on, put some sealer or a gasket on there if you need to. I'm going to skip that for now, and then putting the wheel back on, and that's as easy as it can get. It's a little bit tougher because those springs are more heavy duty and they're bigger than they would be on, you know, a small SUV or a car. They don't have to be so beefy. So these springs are a lot tougher to work with. So should be able to spin just a little bit like that. It feels pretty good. It actually spins better than the driver's side. So get my wheel on here. take it for a test drive.